At the end of 1996, a horror movie was released on the screens, which was originally conceived as a film ridiculing the horror genre. To the surprise of everyone, including its creators, the movie has become a cult. With a budget of $14 million, it grossed $170 million at the box office, and also earned the love of viewers around the world. We are talking about the movie Scream, where a masked maniac preys on teenagers. If you haven't watched it, you've definitely heard of it. Even more fame was given to the film by a parody called A Very Scary Movie, which was also destined to become a cult. But there is one point that even loyal fans don't know about. The Scream is inspired by real events, which we will tell you about today. The connection of the Scream with the chain of real murders became known only in 1997. Then Kevin Williamson, the man who created the plot of the film, gave an interview. He told reporters that the idea of the Scream came to him while watching a documentary about the Gainesville murders. These events, which took place 6 years before the release of the film, scared Kevin a lot. It was night outside, and he was alone in the house, which only added to the horror. During the commercial break, he suddenly heard a noise in the house and panicked. Kevin looked all over the house and found an open window. He was so scared that he took a kitchen knife and called his friend to come to him. The story of real crimes had such an effect on him. For a whole week after these events, Kevin was tormented by nightmares. It was then that he realized that the story of the Gainesville Ripper could become the basis for a good horror movie. Now we will be transported back to 1990 to take a look at those events. The student town of Gainesville in the sunny state of Florida was called a student paradise on Earth. With a population of just over 100,000 people, it covered an area of about 170 square kilometers. On the 20th of August, 1990, the city officially entered the top 10 most beautiful and safe places in the USA. Taking advantage of this, the Gainesville government decided to turn this place into a tourist mecca by investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising Paradise on Earth. Local hotels, restaurants and other companies have also invested a lot of money, expecting an influx of tourists. It would seem that what could go wrong? On the 25th of August, a policeman received reports of a murder on his radio. He was sent to an apartment where two 17-year-old students lived, Christina Powell and Sonia Larson. Entering the apartment, the officer almost vomited from what he saw. The girls were dead. An unknown maniac did terrible things to them. Moreover, the maniac washed the heads of his victims, spending a huge amount of shampoo. We just can't tell all the wild details on YouTube, because the platform will never miss it. For those who are interested in finding out all the creepy details, we will make a detailed post in our Telegram channel, a link to which we will leave in the description. This crime shocked the city, which was considered one of the safest in the country yesterday. Even then, the authorities realized that a positive reputation could come to an end. And the very next day it became clear that a real serial killer had started in the city. On the 26th of August, another policeman received a similar message about the murder on the radio. He was sent to the apartment where the 18-year-old student Krista Hoyt lived. As soon as they crossed the threshold, they and their partner immediately realized that the same maniac was acting. The girl was dead and an unknown criminal did all the same terrible things to her as last time. Her hair was also washed with a huge amount of shampoo. As soon as the news spread around the city, the students panicked. It was obvious that the killer chooses random targets, and anyone can become his victim. No one doubted whether he would continue to kill. There was only one question: when would he strike again? Many students who lived alone began to form groups. People huddled together to avoid being alone day and night. All the bits and door locks were swept off the shelves. Students of local universities tried their best to protect themselves from an unknown maniac. But not everyone succeeded. 2 days after the last murder, the criminal snuck into the apartment rented by 23-year-old Tracy Pass and her classmate Manuel Taboada. The guy was almost 2 meters tall and played football. But it didn't help him in the fight with the monster. The maniac killed both of them, having done all the same abominations with the girl. Thus, in just a few days, the criminal killed 5 students. It was difficult to overestimate the level of panic that swept the town. There was tremendous pressure on the police. The authorities, residents and businessmen who spent millions of dollars a week ago, before the expected influx of tourists. All of them demanded the speedy capture of the killer. Under such pressure, the police really threw all their strength into this case. And already on the 30th of August, she made a loud statement. The maniac is caught. The suspect turned out to be a student named Edward Humphrey. The guy was unbalanced, his face was covered with scars, and he had repeatedly been in the police before. But most importantly, shortly before the murder, he, in search of cheap housing, went around all 3 apartments where the victims lived. All this made the public believe that the police really took the guy. The main pages of the newspapers shouted that the town was now safe, because a dangerous monster was behind bars. And indeed, since Humphrey's arrest, there has not been a single murder in Gainesville, and residents have finally exhaled calmly. A week later, on September 7th, a man named Danny Rolling was arrested for armed robbery in a town called Ocala near Gainesville. He tried to rob the bank, but the employee managed to imperceptibly press the alarm button. First of all, the police found out that Rolling was involved in a series of robberies that have swept the district in recent days. But then the most interesting thing began. The tools that were seized from him during his arrest were very similar to those used by the Gainesville Ripper. Then the police compared the Gainesville murder with Rolling's location and found out that he lived in this city and left it immediately after Humphrey's arrest. But that's not all. The police found out that in 1989 there was a brutal murder in the city of Shreveport. The unknown dealt with William Griss, his 24-year-old daughter Julia and 8-year-old grandson Sean. The killer laid out their bodies in obscene poses and washed the girl's head with a lot of shampoo. And you know what? Rolling was living in Shreveport at this time. Then the police seriously began to wonder if he had anything to do with all these murders. Soon additional arguments appeared in favor of this theory. The police found Rolling's hiding place in the woods, where he hid the stolen money. But there was also something interesting there. Audio diaries on cassettes with hints of a series of murders and things that belonged to the victims of the Gainesville Ripper. All this was already enough to charge him with murder. But the trial dragged on for many years. The maniac refused to admit his guilt. It was not until 1994, on the advice of a lawyer, that he made a frank confession to all the murders committed in Gainesville. By that time, the police had already released Edward Humphrey. He later admitted that he continued to be considered a murderer until Rolling confessed. At the trial, Rolling told in every detail about the atrocities he committed with the victims. He refused to answer only one question. Why did you shampoo the victim's hair? The maniac declared that he would take this secret with him to hell. As for the motives, everything is very simple here. After seeing how Gainesville was recognized as one of the safest cities and nicknamed Ryan, Rolling decided to show everyone that this was not the case. The murders themselves simply gave him pleasure. In other words, there were no specific reasons that prompted him to kill. It's all the fault of a perverted and sick psyche. He also stated that he wanted to become as famous as another maniac, Ted Bundy. Rolling's lawyer hoped that the confession would avoid the death penalty. But that didn't happen. In the same year, 1994, he was sentenced to lethal injection. As it often happens, he lived for many years before the execution of the sentence and managed to excite the public more than once. Danny Rolling managed to get married while in prison. His lover was Sandra London, a journalist specializing in serial killers. She called Rolling a magnificent man and was even proud of the murders he had committed. Either she had serious mental problems, or it was all just a cold calculation. After her husband's death, she released a book called The Making of a Serial Killer. Being officially married to Rolling, she could regularly come to his prison and collect materials for a book. Rolling's execution took place on October 25, 2006, 12 years after the verdict. Taking advantage of the right to receive any dinner before the execution, the maniac ordered lobster, shrimp, baked potatoes, sweet tea and strawberry cheesecake. When he was injected, he sang a church hymn and continued to do so until he lost consciousness. Shortly before his execution, he confessed to a priest about the murders of 3 people in Shreveport, which the police could not prove. Thus, he killed 8 people. His dream of becoming like Ted Bundy was partially fulfilled. He was executed in the same room. Of course, this is a simple coincidence. One of the reasons why the execution of the sentence was delayed for 12 years was the endless appeals that Rolling filed. Until the last moment, he hoped that the court would take pity and replace the decision with a life sentence. Fortunately for the entire civilized society, this never happened. To fully understand who Rolling was, it is necessary to take a brief look at his biography. As is the case with most serial killers, he grew up in brutality. His father constantly beat him and said that Danny was an unwanted child. His mother and younger brother also got it. In his youth, he joined the army, but was expelled from there because of a mental disorder. Then Danny got married, but his wife left him. In 1990, a couple of months before the start of a series of murders, Rolling made an attempt on his father, but he survived. He was on good terms with his younger brother. Before the execution, he spent several hours with him, and the priest also talked to them. When the scream came out on the screens, Rolling was sitting in a cell waiting for the verdict. Most likely, the prison authorities did not allow him to watch films, so the maniac hardly saw him and did not know that he had become the mastermind of the plot. However, most fans of the tape do not know about this until now. Perhaps after this video, the scream will open for you from a different angle. Although the film did not come close to the cruelty with which Rolling killed. I remind you that the rules of YouTube do not allow you to tell all the cruel details here. Therefore, we posted them in our Telegram channel without any censorship. Link in the description. Thanks for watching.